So welcome. Thanks everyone for joining us and those who will join shortly. Today's session is just a user session about Salesmatrix Datacube. We're going to talk about Salesmatrix as a company and our suite of products and where Datacube, I guess, fits into that. My name's Matt. I look after Australia, New Zealand. The guys in New Zealand, there's a couple on the call already. Brent is also in New Zealand on the ground. Brent had a health scare at the end of last year and luckily is back up and fit and healthy and available should you need on the ground support in Kiwiland these days. As far as Australia, I run the team here with Michelle and Alexis, and we're available to help you with product support, training, etc., around the use of the product. And hopefully today provides you, for those who've been using it a long time, and there's quite a few on the call that they're not new to this, so a lot of today will be sort of reinforcement of what you already know, but also there will be a few snippets of things you definitely don't know because we haven't really communicated it to the market at this point in time. So the real agenda for today is 45 minutes. Hope to wrap it up. Given the time's already where it is, we'll probably wrap it up 10 minutes before 2 o'clock Australian Eastern time. So that's about 45 minutes from now. And effectively, we're going to sort of focus on what is the premise behind Salesmatrix. Our 4 suites of products all have a common theme behind them. And we want to sort of talk about how the Datacube product fits in with that. And then ultimately, those of you who have sales reps or account managers, why SWOT exists, and it's a logical extension on the Datacube product. And then we should have time at the end for Q&A. Invariably, I expect some questions. So there's a fundamental principle of business. It was taught to me a long time ago. There's different language used for this, but it all comes back to the same principle. Growth is not just a matter of selling to new clients. Growth, importantly, particularly when you've got a mature business working in a mature sales channel, as I think most of you are, growth is actually a combination of acquisition of new customers plus the retention of your existing customers and the development of those existing accounts. Salesmatrix has not focused on acquisition as one of our key areas. This is something, there's plenty of CRM systems and marketing tools and various ways that acquisition can happen. That's not what we're about. What we're very much focused on is identifying and ensuring retention of existing customers, and then looking for opportunities to develop those existing relationships to effectively grow the revenue per client over time. So today we're going to talk about Salesmatrix Datacube and the way that Salesmatrix Datacube does help you with the retention and account development. Ultimately, Salesmatrix Datacube is a dynamic view of your data, which allows you to hone in on key opportunities. It's basically about, importantly, being able to refine your data source, which is, in most of the people on the call's case, Attaché, Advanced Business Manager, or MYOB XO, effectively pulling the data from those groupings, allowing you to have dynamic groupings, and then starting to look for opportunities and risks involved in those customers. The tool's not designed necessarily to output an A4 page for a board report. The system's really designed for sitting down and dynamically assessing and twisting and slicing and dicing your data to focus in on things that you really need to, as far as help retention and help that account development. Ultimately, whilst mostly what we're going to talk about today is customer focused, so looking at your sales by customer, by product over time, ultimately a lot of our clients do use it from a purchasing and procurement and warehouse management perspective in order to identify slow moving stock, identify purchasing behaviors over time as well. So it can be used equally to analyze your stock not just, I guess, that customer perspective. But today's session will be very much focused on the customer perspective. Getting support. We do have a new website. Sorry for the Kiwis online. It is an Aussie website, salesmatrix.au for this region. We obviously have salesmatrix.com, which is our parent company. Those of you who've been around long enough will know Kim. Kim's the founder of the business. Kim's now based in Turkey, has a team with him in Turkey and also people spread over the world. We have a distributor for Ireland, a distributor for the United States. I and my company tend to look after Australia and New Zealand, as I mentioned, with Brent's assistant in New Zealand. If you do ever need support, the easiest thing to do is you can go to our website. There's actually a little support on the website, a button on the website that can jump into our ticketing system, or feel free to email support@salesmatrix.au, or there's our phone numbers for Australia and New Zealand. Ultimately, Salesmatrix is a company that has 4 products. Now, most of you will call the product I'm going to refer to today as Datacube. You'll call that Salesmatrix, and that's effectively what we've called it forever and a day. But the reality is we do have 4 products in our suite. The Datacube product is our mainstay. It's now 20 years mature. It was originally developed out of a company in Melbourne called InMatrix, dating back to the early 2000s. Kim was a part of that company, and then Kim led a management buyout in about 2006, and effectively my involvement dates back to 2002. I was working at Attaché 20 years ago, and they were the first partner for this particular product. And yeah, 20 years later, Kim now lives in Turkey, as I mentioned, and still the major shareholder in the business, still runs the product team. And the product has grown and matured over time. So the idea behind the Datacube product is it will link up with your ERP system. It will effectively pull in the information such as your invoice and credit note data, and it will analyze that in a slice and dice scenario, which is what's known as an OLAP cube. And I'll talk about that in a minute. We do have another product. Most of you on the call actually also use our SWOT. What happened with Salesmatrix Datacube over time is, as you add more features and functions to it, complexity is a natural byproduct of features and functions. So more features and functions makes the product more complex. And we really discovered that the average sales rep, particularly in B2B, wholesale stock and debtors businesses, like pretty much all of you are, is not necessarily a technically savvy person that's analyzing data all the time. And so we found that the product, as it got more feature rich, became more distant from the sales reps. And so around sort of the mid 2010s, so about 2014, 2015, Kim and the team started working on SWOT. And the idea behind SWOT is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, taking actually all the smarts that are in the Datacube product and presenting as plain English for your sales reps to be able to interpret the data without having to understand data, in fact. It becomes a playbook for your reps when they're basically looking at their customers. It can also be used as SWOT on products and often used by purchasing managers, marketing managers, etc., to analyze which products are moving, where the opportunities are thereafter. But in effect, SWOT and Datacube are very much related. Datacube can pretty much give you all the information that's available in SWOT, but SWOT presents it in a much more simple to digest format of plain English in one screen, as opposed to jumping in and out and slicing and dicing in multi-dimensions. SWOT's available as Apple iOS app, an Android app, or a Windows app. In each of those platforms, you just need to go to the App Store, so the Windows App Store, the Apple iOS App Store on either an iPad or a smartphone, iPhone. And then for Android, it's on Android Google Play. It's available from there, and we do basically sync your data from your ERP system up to the cloud so that it's then accessible to your reps out in the field. Another product that we have is a dashboard. So I mentioned at the start, Datacube's not about producing a a static report in an A4 format that you might take to your board meetings. People do like those things, and they do exist, and often there's a particular reporting tool that aligns to the ERP. We do have our own. We call it Salesmatrix Dashboards. It's been around, I say new, it's been around for a few years now. Our real point of difference is that it's quite cost effective. If you're out there looking at things like Microsoft Power BI or Click or Tableau or some of the reporting tools that exist in the space these days, the licensing costs can go up pretty quickly. We also have a point of difference in that we've got connectors to all the ERP and inventory management systems in the market, be they cloud-based solutions or legacy ERP. We are able to sync up cloud-based dashboards at a fraction of the cost or complexity that you might get with some of the other systems. So if you are looking for more static style reporting or dashboard style reporting, it is available within our suite. That's not the product that we're looking at today. Salesmatrix Datacube is very much a dynamic analysis of your data, as you will see. The other product in our suite that not many people know about, has been around a while. We haven't really promoted it much. It's called Budget. Not all of our customers do sales budgets, but as you'll see today, the Salesmatrix Datacube product allows you to create a budget. What Salesmatrix Budget allows you to do is analyze actual versus your budget that you create. So what you get with the budget created in the Datacube product, as we'll show you today, is a static budget by product by customer in multiple dimensions. So you can actually have a budget down to sales rep level, down to product level, down to customer level, all within the one budget. What Salesmatrix Budget allows you to do is then continue to analyze performance against that budget. And effectively, you can dynamically adjust your budget over time. But the budgeting tool is really about having a look at performance versus actual versus budget and variances to budget. And you can have up to 12 different dimensions of revenue actual versus quantity actual versus budget revenue and budget quantities, etc., that you have. So it allows a view on being able to compare those. Now, we're not going to go into this product today, but if that is something that is of interest, just let me know and we can sort of talk about it in a later stage. Importantly, Datacube connects basically to any system that's got the ability to read data. The logos on the screen are the ones that we most commonly connect to. As I mentioned, I think of the people on the call, it's mainly Attache, MYB, XO, and Advanced Business Manager, but we do connect to many of these other systems. And largely where we're getting a lot of our growth is in some of these other systems that people are using. So let's talk about Datacube as a product. So there's a technology called OLAP Cube, and effectively what Salesmatrix Datacube does is pull the data out of your ERP system and then stores it in a way that is dynamically accessible and slice and diceable, if there's such a word. So I'm able to basically, rather than running a static report, I'm able to pull out data and then go, okay, I want to look at products by period or customers by period or products by customer, and I can dynamically switch between those. And the Datacube allows that to happen in a much more real-time way than what you would have running out of a standard static reporting tool. The key thing is the data is not live. The data is generally updated overnight. But the important thing there is there's nothing that's going to happen today that really is going to move the needle on the analysis that you're doing. Most people are analyzing trends over time. And effectively, as of close of business yesterday or last night is really more than sufficient as far as an update. Those updates can be automated. Those who've been using Salesmatrix for a long time may still have to manually create the data cubes. You don't have to do that. We can set up automated data cube creation. So every time you log into the system, it will be up to date as of last night. You can have multiple data sets. So a data cube has some limitations, which we'll talk about in a moment, such as up to 5 groups of customers or 5 different ways rather to group your customers or 5 different ways to group your products. If you need to group more than that, you can actually just create multiple cubes that then allow for an unlimited number of ways to slice and dice your customers. We'll also talk about sub accounts or subsets today, which is another way that you can create multiple data sets and analyze in different ways. Ultimately, the data coming into Salesmatrix Datacube is driven by a script. The scripts are customizable and they are in a language called SQL, which is a fairly common language out there in the marketplace. We're happy to help you with scripting. Don't expect that you have to be able to do it yourself or have the skills on staff to do it. If you do, you can change the scripts, but we're here to help you with the management of those scripts. Generally, we find people get to a point where they're happy with the scripts that they've got and that they're not really changing the scripts regularly. It's something that you may change now and then as you change the way you're using your ERP system, or even potentially change ERP systems. Ultimately, we're pulling your invoicing data and we're looking at customer A buys X number of products B from a sales channel C for Y dollars at a cost of Z. So we pull these key dynamics, which we then allow you to analyze. For those of you using Attaché, just as an example, we can pull the customer fields from the customer master file in Attaché. For example, the sort detail field, the sales rep field, the territory field. These become means by which we can analyze and group your customers. The same with the products. Often we use the product group, the supplier 1 field or the supplier 2 field. There's other fields that you may not have use for at the moment. Very few Attaché customers use their cash register product. And so often we can use things like cash register department or default cost center, or even the custom fields as means of grouping your products and your customers. A key thing to understand is the better your groups and the better the groups at the data source, the better the analysis and particularly if you're using SWOT, the better the artificial intelligence engine is at determining where your opportunities lie. And we'll talk about that in more detail. For those of you using XO, again, we can pull different groupings of fields from the XO master files for products and customers. I don't have an Advanced Business Manager slide, but the same idea applies to Advanced Business Manager. And any ERP or inventory management system that you move to, we can pull the respective data fields as means of grouping those. We always suggest that you keep the data groupings in your ERP system as a source of truth. We will help you basically clean that up because Salesmatrix will show the anomalies where they're not grouped properly. Just as a note to Attaché users, I know, and dare I say it's a historical reason, that a lot of Attaché customers have deleted their invoice history out of their live data set and kept their invoice history in other data sets. It is possible for Salesmatrix to consolidate multiple data sets. So if you find yourself after financial year being frustrated that data is missing from the Datacube, just give us a call. We can actually pull data from multiple data sources. And we actually consolidate that data in the Salesmatrix SWOT database so that you could then ultimately have a much wider data range to analyze. Similarly, if you ever move ERP or accounting systems, and there are a lot of ERP and accounting systems in the market across Australia and New Zealand, one thing that we do offer, and this happens quite a bit, if you transition from one product to another, Salesmatrix can pull data from multiple sources and consolidate that data. So you don't necessarily have to worry greatly about losing your sales history because we can provide you that sales history even if you change systems. I mentioned it before, but hey, if you don't have automated updates for your Datacube product today, send me an email. We can set them up. It's just a simple Windows task scheduler process to set them up, and we can help you with having the updates automated. Most of you, as we'll jump in a minute, should be able to just log in the morning and see the up-to-date data. Versioning. Current version is version 6.0V. I think this came out, there was a few minor bug fixes in the last couple of months, and I don't know many of you will be on V. You can get version V, just the executable, from the salesmatrix.com website, and I will show you that at the end. If you do want to do the upgrade yourself, I'll show you what to do. If you want us to just get that sorted for you, just let us know and we can sort it out. For your interest, the Datacube product we're about to jump into, there are two different versions of the Datacube product. A full license allows you to create Datacubes yourself. So you can go, it will run the updates, or you can create a live update from your ERP system at the click of a button. The viewer-only license, the data needs to be created by a full license. The difference is the monthly cost. The full license is $100 a month. The viewer license is $50 a month. And so every organization needs to have at least one full license. But if you've got multiple users of Datacube, then some of the other users can have the viewer-only license. Let's basically close out of here and jump into Salesmatrix Datacube and really get into the crux of the session. I'm going to swap my screens over because I'm going to start on this screen. And close out of my PowerPoint and come down to here. Okay, I've got Salesmatrix sitting here on my screen. Just to explain when I log in, the data set name, if you've got auto updating running, your data sets in here will be the ones that are being updated. Okay, I don't need to hit new. What new does is I want to go and get the data from my ERP system now. Now, depending on how much data you've got, and I can look at you guys at Complete Health, to go and do a new data cube might actually take hours because you've got lots of data in your advanced business manager system or your other ERP system. So in that case, we always want to be using the data set that's auto-created overnight. But if you do need to get data as of today and see an update and you can't wait till tomorrow, then the idea behind new is when I hit new, I'll have a series of scripts. And you're not limited to 4. We just have very few clients who use more than 4 scripts. So we have buttons here for 4, where you can go and get a different script for pulling different data from your ERP system. An example might be, rather than pulling customer information and customer invoices, you might want to look at supplier information and supplier invoices and supplier credit notes to analyze your procurement as opposed to analyzing your customer sales. Because procurement's going to take into account things like wastage, etc. And it can also be done in the purchase unit as opposed to the sale unit. So some of our customers will analyze procurement separate script to what they analyze as far as their main script. You also might have a subset of customers that you're particularly honing in on. One of our biggest users is a group called the HSK group or FTA Foods. They will analyze, for example, just their providors, where they've got customers across different groups. They want to go and see how the Indian providors are doing versus, say, the Asian providors, etc. So they will just have a sub data cube for a particular group of customers that they want to analyze. But anyway, if I go back to my main screen here, I'm just going to close and I'm just going to jump into my data set called Health Snacks. Now, I made a little bit of a mistake when I was setting this up today. I thought I'd just quickly, easily change the dates. Our standard data snacks data cube is 2019, 2020. I went through and I manually updated that through to 2021, 2022, but I didn't complete it. So you might see a couple of dates that don't look right in today's demo, but blame me for that. I thought I'd sort of be a smart aleck at the last minute and yeah, I brought myself unstuck. But anyway, I'm going to jump into that data cube just by hitting OK. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to swap this screen over. I will move it to the different screen so I can run this differently. Oh, I'll just put it across both screens now. That was well done. Now I've lost my Zoom session. Oh. Okay, let me do that again. Sorry, guys, I keep selecting the wrong window when I go to put it to Zoom. I'll just get it right this time. There we go. And we're back. Okay, so when I've logged into Salesmatrix, my default screen has gone to customers by period. Now, you may not get that screen, okay? You may get whatever screen you set up in your options, or if you haven't set anything up in your options, you'll typically get this screen, which is the Opportunity Navigator screen, okay? If your first reaction is to always close the Opportunity Navigator, then my suggestion to you is you should change where you land. And the way to do that is this button here, which is called Options. Okay, when I click on Options, there's actually a default view option here. So if you're like me, generally going to go into your customers by period view, then I would suggest that you turn off Show Summary at Startup, which would be ticked just there, and set your default view as you want it to be. And then if you prefer to look at the last 12 months or the last 24 months, and this is where I needed to change it. I mentioned I was updating this before. That'll fix my problem. I'm going to look at the last 24 months as my default view here. So when I accept, the next time I log into Datacube, it's going to default to this screen. But let me just go back. For those of you who do land on this screen, this is actually the origins of the SWOT app. As I mentioned, in the early 2010s, we started to get this trouble of functionality leads to complexity. And so to solve that, the first thing that Kim and the team started to do was to look at, well, can we create plain English navigation for our product? And the Opportunity Navigator was about providing you plain English navigation within the Datacube solution. We built that, and then that actually led to the creation of the SWOT app. But this has value today because it allows you to navigate across these different areas with a plain English. There's also this tabs here on the right, which is the Results Navigator. So I can come in here and I can have a macro view of my business, or I can filter down to customer groups, product groups, sales reps, and I can look at periods. I can compare year to date versus prior years, etc. And then what it's going to do is going to show me how my performance overall is going. Okay, so the traffic light's going to show whether we're up or down. The top area are the results. The middle area is what we call the activities. So the number of products that you're selling to, the number of customers that you're selling, and the number of reps that you've basically had through the year. Down here are going to be your key performance indicators. And these are, if you take out a sales textbook, then one of the things that you should be focused on is growing revenue per sales rep. The other thing you should focus on is the number of items that you're selling into each customer. Another thing that you could focus on is how many customers that you have per sales rep and getting that balance right. The number of items that each of your sales reps are selling, etc. And so these key performance indicators are just showing how the business is going as a whole. Or as I mentioned before, I could actually drill in and have a look at that for an individual rep, a group of items or a group of customers, etc. Best of breed on the right down here is then your top 20. And again, it can be top 20 overall. This is my top 20 customers overall. And on the one screen, it's going to show me revenue, margin, and units. The interesting thing here for this sample data set is my number one customer by revenue. I actually lose money on selling to them. So often I like to show people that, hey, your best customer is your number one customer by margin. And that's where we basically bring margin in, and we can see that our number one customer is actually someone who we only get $30,000 worth of revenue from, but because they're a high margin customer, they're our number one customer for profitability. All this data can be copied out to Excel or pasted to an email. It's just a nice way to analyze, and you can actually go in and drill in on not just showing all. I could look at customers. I could look at regions as an example. I might just want to look at my Eastern region. And so I'm now just looking at the customers by margin within my Eastern region. I could have looked at this by sales rep, etc. So that's, if you do want to use the Navigator, that's the key usages of the Navigator. But let's get into the Datacube. So as I mentioned, my default view now is customers by period. I can look at it in months. A lot of you, based on your industries, you're better to focus on quarters. So you can just change your view to quarters. Now, key thing with Salesmatrix is it's actually doesn't care about the fact that end of financial year in New Zealand is the 31st of March or in Australia is June 30. Typically what we're going to analyze is 2 years of rolling, because it's not financial year that matters, it's month to month over time that matters. How are we going in March 2023 versus March 2022 or March 2021? And having a look at those comparatives. So when it looks at the data, it's not a financial year quarter. So Q1 is actually January to March. Q2 is April through to June. Now you can change this, and I'm not going to show this today, but we can do financial year quarters if that matters to you. And the same applies to years. Years are calendar years. They're not financial years. And again, I can show you how to change that if you do need to do that. But yes, so a lot of our customers will focus on quarterly views just to get a real understanding of performance over time by their customers. Now, let me just show you some basics of navigating the grid. Firstly, you can sort on any column by clicking on the column once and it will sort ascending. Clicking again will sort descending. So what that's just done is brought my main customers to the top. I could have done that sort on any one particular month if I wanted to. I can also sort across my rows, which is effectively sorting my columns, by double clicking. So if I double click on the grand total for life supplements, it's going to sort basically across the page as well. So here I've clicked on Health Live East. Their number one quarter was Q1 2022, and now it's going to sort descending across the page. The next thing I can also do is I can apply my traffic lights. Traffic lights, if you remember back to probably about year 8 mathematics, it's the application of your data on a bell curve. So what it's looking for is what's average, what's below average, what's a long way below average, what's above average, and what's a long way above average, in simple terms. If you understand the maths behind it, we're looking at one standard deviation up the top here, and I can toggle that to change the colors. But effectively, bright green is really good, top 7% overall, or thereabouts. Light green is above average, so to the right of the bell curve, so more than 32% when you put everything across. Amber is in the middle, orange is to the left of the bell curve, so below average, and then red is well below average. So you can see I had a pretty poor Q1 2021, and it's basically improved over time. So the benefit of the traffic lights is drawing your attention to numbers that are otherwise just yellow and black, which can be hard to see sometimes. Importantly around the grid is my ability to dynamically drill in on any of these cells. I can see here that Vitamin Shop had a pretty poor Q2 2021. If I drill in on that, I can actually click on it. I can see a summary of results by revenue margin units and cost of goods sold. I can also see the 93 items that they bought off us in that quarter, and I can see who the sales rep was at that point in time. So that gives me a real understanding of what's going on with that cell. You'll see here also that I've got revenue as my units. This little button here allows me to change the values that sit in the grid. For those of you who've been using Salesmatrix a long time, that's a relatively new icon. I think we added it about 18 months ago. Historically, what you would have done is right mouse click anywhere in the grid, brought up this particular menu that allows you to change the numbers within the grid. And there's lots of numbers. There's values, there's ratios, there's performance. So if I come over here and I click on this button, I can look at, will show me revenue margin units. I want to see, rather than revenue, let's look at the margin that we're making per customer. And so it will go away. So we already know that our number one customer by revenue is not our number one customer by margin. And so now when I do the sort, my number one customer by margin is Great Earth, and he comes to the top of the list. I can also change to a whole heap of other things like ratios, margin percentages. I'm not going to read them all out. You can read them yourself. This one's an interesting one, which is number of items. So when I'm looking at a customers by period view, I can actually see the number of SKUs that these customers have bought by period. Interestingly, here, 411 Collins Street bought nothing of us in Q3. In Q4, they bought 14 different SKUs. They might have been shut down during COVID. You know, that probably aligns to that. But yeah, that's an interesting, I just clicked on that accidentally. That's an interesting view. So I'm not just looking at revenue margin. I've got that ability, as I said, to use this button here to set the grid views, or my right mouse click to have a look at what I'm looking at. I don't have to restrict myself to revenue, which is when we visit our customers, we often find that's what they do. I'm just going to turn off the traffic lights now and show you how I can now change my axes. So I've got my customers, I've got my periods. I don't have to just limit myself to those views. This button here, or again, the right mouse click, I can change what I'm looking at as far as what the grid shows. So I can show items by period if I want. So rather than looking at customers by period, I'm going to revert now to items by period. It's reverted to a monthly view. I might click on that and revert to a quarterly view. Straight away, I can hear a couple of you thinking, hey, he's got the product code there as well as the description. How do I get that? Well, again, that's in our options. This is a feature we added a couple of years ago. The ability to show your items either by code, by name, by code and name, by name and code. If you come up to the options button and go to the descriptions page, you can actually change the descriptions that are used within the system, right? So rather than revenue, you might call it sales. You can change what that means. But down here is the important one. So within my product aspect, if you call it items, you can call it items here. But if you call it products, you can actually change it within Salesmatrix to be products. And then the way you show that, if you want to just see the name of the product or the code of the product or the name and the code or the code and the name, you get to show that and display that yourself. Now, you'll see when we do both name and code, we separate it with what's called a double pipe. What the double pipe allows me to do is when I go out to Excel, there's a function in Excel called text to columns. So I'll take that out to Excel at the click of a button. That's just gone across onto my other screen. There it is there. And so you see how it's now got the products with the code and the name. A simple way of doing this is to do an insert. Go to this column and I go data, text to columns, delimited, next, by other, and then I do above the enter key, shift pipe, and then treat consecutive delimiters as one, finish. Now what I've done is I've separated out my code from my product description. So I'm able to basically have that out in Excel if I need to do whatever I need to do in Excel. So that's just an explanation of that. Same thing applies to your customers as well as your inventory items. Everything I showed you as far as the grid navigation, the ability to change what data presents is here regardless of what I'm looking at. I could change, for example, to a customers by products view. This is an interesting one because it basically highlights what we call the market white space. It'll have a lot of columns and a lot of rows in this view, so it can be quite slow to load. But when I load it, I'm able to sort. And remember, I can sort my rows by basically clicking on the column here. And I can also sort across my columns by double clicking there. So what I've now got is my main customers by my main products. It's at this point that I highlight for you what is the focus view. So this little button up here that kind of looks like the focus on a camera allows you to actually filter out. So rather than having every customer and every product in my view, focus allows me to either look at, and the idea behind this was the 80-20 rule. So top 20% of your customers will produce, on average, 80% of your revenue. The top 20% of your products will also do the same. So within this view, I can actually see whether the 80-20 rule applies. So for example, I might look at 100% of my customers and drop that down to 20% of my products. And you'll see for this particular data set, 90% of revenue comes from 20% of customers. I might focus in on, say, the top 10% of my customers and maybe the top 20% of my products. You see here, that's going to limit me to 83 out of 417 SKUs, 134 out of 671 customers. Now what happens if I go view focus, I'm now looking at a limited data set on where I'm making most of my revenue. Okay, so this is where I'm sort of going to got the most opportunity to improve potentially, because these are the people who are generating the most revenue, and these are the products that they're typically buying from us. Again, there's a lot of numbers on the page. The first thing I start to do is to bring in the traffic lights. Now, isn't it interesting? You know, straight away here, my number, I don't know, 8th best customer, Our Chemist Health, doesn't buy any of my main products off me. That to me sounds like an opportunity. Inspired Health doesn't buy my number 3 most popular product off me. So I start to basically be able to analyze that market white space and be able to take advantage of it, focusing in on those rather than looking at everyone, just focusing in on those main customers and those main products. If I take off the focus, which is just by hitting the focus button again, I go back to all my data again. And so you'll see that the focus selection disappears, the red text at the top here, and it will go back to a all customers by all periods. I should have turned the traffic lights off, because whenever the traffic lights are on, there's literally millions of calculations that are happening in order to produce that. So it can be a little bit slow to load. So that's the slicing and the dicing. The next thing I want to talk about, I'm going to basically turn the traffic lights off, and I'm going to go back to a customers by period view. And I'm going to show you the left side of the screen. Okay. So on the left side of the screen, when we look at categories, this is where the data coming out of your ERP system can be valuable in order to analyze your customers. Firstly, I've got a field here called region. So I'm going to analyze my customers by region. So you can see I've got Eastern region, Northern region, Southeastern region, etc. If I want to look within a region and just see what's going on with my Eastern region customers, I don't just hit on the plus to select the header. I then go into the child in the tree structure. So what you will see is that I'm just looking now at my customers Eastern. It says it at the top of the column there. These are just my customers within my Eastern region. So the idea behind the categories on the left is you can have static groupings coming out of your ERP system. The other thing that you can do is you can have dynamic groupings that are occurring. And this is where I want to draw your attention to the assessments. The assessments are really powerful for understanding what's going on, and these can change over time. So rather than having a static grouping in your ERP system, we can use the assessments to group our customers. Now, some of those groupings can be, say, customer to product cross-sell. This is one I use all the time. So it's going to go and analyze what number of SKUs your different customers are buying off you over time. So I'm just going to look at, say, the year 2022, and I'm going to store that as one of my groupings. Down the bottom here, store customer category. I've got one unused one there. I'm going to store it as unused, and I'm going to go and calculate that. So that's dynamically looked at every one of my customers, looked at how many SKUs they buy off me. And now I've got 6% of my customers buy more than 21 product lines off me. 10% buy between 8 and 21. 8% buy between 5 and 8. If I close out of the assessment screen, I now have cross-sell as a grouping of my customers, a dynamic grouping. And you'll see here, there's no risk that this is going to be the same for all of you. The customers buying more than 21 product lines off us make up the bulk of our revenue. And this is why cross-sell is such an important aspect of selling into a channel of customers, and why SWOT ultimately exists, because we want to grow the number of SKUs per customer. Typically, the more SKUs a customer buys off us, the more loyal they are to us, and the more revenue that we're potentially going to generate from them. In this case, I now want to have a look at who those customers are. So the same concept exists. I hit on the plus. I want to go in and have a look at more than 21 products. These are the customers we talk to our sales reps about. These are the customers that we want to look after and make sure they're getting what they need out of us. A great strategy, though, is to actually look at the customers who are only buying a lesser group. So say in my example here, 5 to 8 products off us. I've got all these customers who are only buying between 5 and 8 products from us. I want to try and get as many of these guys buying more than 8 products off us as possible. So what I would do is, for a quarter, I'm going to have a little competition amongst my sales reps. And I'm going to basically get each of my sales reps to focus on this group of 5 to 8 products and see how many of them they can add SKUs into. Lo and behold, SWOT is going to tell them what to sell those customers. But as the sales manager, you have the ability to see that within the dynamic nature of the Datacube product. So, for example, here, I'm just going to sort these customers in the 5 to 8 product group. I've got Health Live Frankston at the top. They're a good customer, but they only buy between 5 and 8 SKUs off us. If I double click on Health Live Frankston, it's going to bring up another screen, which comes up here. And they're a bad example because they've only just bought, they've actually stopped buying off us. That's interesting. Let's pick someone else. Let's go to this one, the Great Nutrition Live Well. First thing it's going to show us is a summary of this customer over the last 12 months. And I can see that they've had a pretty bad end of last year. No sales in October and November, a bit of sales in December. Where the power of the product really comes in is the intelligence. So if I look at category comparison on the intelligence tab, it's going to allow me to compare to other groupings of these customers. So these guys are in a customer group called Gen Chems, right? The customer group Gen Chems is set up in your ERP system as a grouping of your customers. 142 times you've sold the Psyllium 97.51 kilo to Gen Chem customers, but this particular Gen Chem customer has never bought that product from you. So the reality is that's got to be a buying opportunity. And that if you use SWOT, that's what's actually coming up within the SWOT app. The glucose powder 5 kilos, 90 times you've sold it to the Gen Chems, but you've never sold it to this particular customer. Region, let's have a look at the people in the North region, because particularly when you're dealing in food, the region drives food habits and buying habits. You know, I'm in Sydney. If I'm going to Villawood, I know that basically there's going to be a big popular Asian food community. Whereas if I go to, say, Brighton Les Sands, it's a different sort of more halal type foods in that region. So different regions have a big impact on buying behaviors. So here I'm going to compare what other people in the North region are buying that this Great Live Nutrition Live Well is not buying off us. 343 times I've sold the Longs Organics to customers in the North region, and I've never sold it to this particular customer. So these are the opportunities to develop the account and improve that. And if you're using SWOT, this is what's getting presented. The difference with SWOT is we try not to overwhelm the sales rep with too many opportunities. We try and limit the number of opportunities to the 5 most profitable, most likely opportunities. We do profile it based on percentage likelihood and revenue to be generated. And so the sales rep will be presented the 5 best ones. But when you're in Salesmatrix Datacube, there's no limit to the number of opportunities that it's going to present to you. A very powerful one, and remember we talked about retention. One surefire sign that you're potentially going to lose a customer is where they stop buying certain products from you and they start sourcing them from your competitor. So what we want to know is, what have they stopped buying off us in the last 6 months or 2 months or 3 months or 1 month? The SWOT app's going to show this, but the SWOT app's going to do it on a 3-month. What have they stopped buying off us in the last 3 months? In Salesmatrix Datacube, I get to basically drive that myself. In the last 12 months, what did they buy prior that they haven't bought off us in the last 12 months? And the Kumara starch is the top one that they used to buy off us that they've stopped buying. Again, if I want to focus on getting them from 5 to 8 products, then that's going to be a key way to do that. And Market Basket, you may have heard this story from me before. Walmart in the US did an analysis about 10 years ago on the most correlated item within a Walmart supermarket. And they were shocked to find that the number 2 most correlated items within all of Walmart was nappies with beer. Basically, it was something like 70% of the time that someone would buy nappies, what they call diapers, they would also be buying beer. And when they really got in and analyzed that, whilst it wasn't a logical correlation, it did correlate to the husband coming home from work being rung to, hey, can you pop into Walmart and get some nappies on the way home, and helping themselves to a six-pack. My point of that story is that the correlations aren't always obvious. It's not always, I used to run a supermarket while I was at university. It's not always bacon and eggs, which is obvious, or crumpets and golden syrup. It can be things that you don't even realize correlate. In this example, the customer is buying the one in the middle. So they're buying the lavender, but they're not buying the one on the left. And over here, we'll give you the correlation between that. So 32% of the time I sell the lavender, I'm also selling the Long's Organics. Hopefully that makes sense. So it's giving you the correlation. Again, in SWOT, it's only going to give you the key correlations above a certain percentile, which is actually customizable in SWOT, but typically would be more than 25% correlation. It's going to look for those cross-sell opportunities.
Matt?
Yes, Adrian.
Just in that was a really good tool that I've never used before, but that seeing your categories on your left of the screen there, how do you choose? Like, you've got cross-sell there. I don't have that on mine.
I'll send you the video after this, but I did show you that because I dynamically created it. So the cross-sell is one where I went to the assessments, Adrian.
Yes.
And I selected products to customer cross-sell.
Yeah, got that bit.
As an assessment. Now, the bottom here is store to customer category.
Ah, okay.
So what you've got to do is, before you hit calculate, you've got to select where you want to put it. Now, you can either overwrite one of the groupings that you've got coming out of your attaché system, or you use one of the unused ones.
Okay.
Right? Keep in mind that each time, this is dynamic, so it gets completely wiped tonight when the update happens on your server. So yeah, the key thing you might have missed is store to customer category when I run the assessment.
Okay, thanks.
Now that applies across all of these assessments, right? So there's lots of assessments by customers, by products, and the same concept applies. I am conscious of the time. I do want to show a couple of other things before I wrap up. One thing that I haven't shown is I showed the categories on the left. People often ask me about these ones down here, which is the salesperson's, customers, and products. One question that Brent got in New Zealand yesterday was, hey, Brent, I want to look at all the products that a customer has bought off us. Well, the simple way to do that is to actually change your view to, I want to look at all the products. So I go products by period view. And then I can filter my products based on the customer that buys them. So I might want to have a look at Aurora Holistic Health. And so the filter, so categories is a way of grouping. Sales rep, customers, products here is a way of filtering. So you filter a dimension, which is your grid, based on a dimension here on the left. So now I'm looking at just the products that Aurora Holistic Health have bought off us over time. Now, a reason a lot of our customers will have multiple scripts is in this filter view, they might want to look at groups of their customers. I want to know what products our bakery customers are buying off us, or what products our butcher customers are buying off us, et cetera, et cetera. So we can create another data cube where, rather than customer level filtering, it could be customer group level filtering that you do. Now, the other thing I want to show you is this star button here. If you get to a view that you'd like, I can just hit favorite and I go add to favorites. Now, what that's going to do is I don't have to remember how I got there. The next time I log in, I can just go to one of my favorite views and it will load all the things I did to get there. I don't have to remember the steps that I took to get there. So if there's certain things you want to look at regularly, hit on the favorites, and then the bottom view down here on the left will bring up each of those favorites. You can name those favorites to your heart's content. I'm just going to cross off on all my points. Important one, and I'm not going to go into great detail on this, conscious of time, but those of you in New Zealand at the moment who might be looking at your new financial year budget, there is a budgeting tool within the Salesmatrix product. The Datacube product allows me to forward project what my budget needs to be by customer, by product, by sales rep, etc. So if you want to create an individual customer budget, or more likely an individual sales rep budget, you can come in here and you can do that based on some key drivers. So I could say, okay, we're going to up our prices because of inflation. We're going to grow our prices by 5% over the next year. At the same time, we actually want to grow our volume by 2%. And you start to see dynamically what impact that's going to have on your revenue over time. there's also correlation drivers coming through. In this data set, it's saying the number of products that you sell per customer is directly correlated. There's actually an 81.5% correlation. So almost 100% correlation between the number of products you sell and the growth in revenue. The more products you sell, which was that last example I gave, the better the revenue is going to be. So what if rather than 20.58 products, our average customer was buying 22 products off us? And that starts to filter through. You'll see that overall, that's going to be a 17% increase in margin in the next financial year. I can bring in seasonality. I can then filter on options. Where do I want to build my budget against? I might want to build it against a certain supplier or a certain sales reps, or I might want to basically take margin out of it because I want to sit down with my customer and show the budget that I want to basically them to create. I mentioned at the start, Salesmatrix budget. You can go and create a Salesmatrix budget data set that then allows you to do that comparison of actual versus budget as the year goes on. The thing with Salesmatrix, I haven't covered probably half of the product. It would be an 8-hour sort of real training session to get it. But hopefully today's been a bit of a teaser around, really getting understand the product. And hopefully there's been some nice tidbits. I'm just going to open it up to questions at this point in time. If anyone's got any, unmute yourself and ask away.
Yeah. Hi, Matt. It's Hayden here.
G'day, Hayden.
Hey, a while back we used to use Swap, but it was via the web browser. So this is before it became an app. And now we pretty much use it. Well, I use it on my mobile phone. It's really handy just before I go see a customer. I'll jump in there and look up data and make a plan. One of the features that I don't think transferred from the web browser to the app was the monthly total. So when you're in the customer activity screen where you're looking at the products and what they've been purchasing per month.
I might just stop you there. SWOT's tomorrow's session. I know what you're talking about, but basically the people on today's call, it was about Datacube. I'm happy to come back to you on that. But I know what you mean. When you go to the activity screen, you want a total in the activity screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll come back to you directly on that. But tomorrow's session is on SWOT. So that's what that'll be about.
Cool.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Matt, is there the last little bit you showed us on the budget creation, is there a separate video in relation to setting that up in more detail?
Funnily enough, this time last year, I went into a lot more detail. And yes, on the YouTube channel, last year's webinar, the March webinar last year, went into a bit more detail around that.
Okay.
Also, look, it's the sort of thing, you can't really break anything when the data is being pulled to the side. So it's the sort of thing you can go in and have a play with. But yeah, let me, we will send out the link to today's video. But in the YouTube channel, which is just, if you search for Salesmatrix, you will find last year's video where we did spend a bit more time on it.
Thanks.
All right. Well, that sounds like that's the end of the questions. I appreciate everyone for joining in today. Tomorrow, there will be the session on SWOT, as I just mentioned to Hayden. If you haven't registered for that, you can just go to salesmatrix.eventbrite.com, or the email that you registered for this one will cover Salesmatrix SWOT in more detail. Any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is matt@salesmatrix.au. That's no com, just .au. Will get me. And there's my mobile number if you want to have a chat about anything you've seen today or anything you didn't see today that you hoped we would have covered. Thank you for your time, everyone. As I mentioned, this will be up on YouTube and we will share the link with everyone thereafter if you want to show it with the team. Thanks very much.